Hi, I'm Kalynn Amadio, your Boomer host and creator of the Boomer's Ultimate Guide podcast, and I am thrilled to introduce you to this episode's guest. My special guest today is Blair Glaser. Blair is a leadership and relationship consultant who helps singles and couples create amazing relationships with leadership skills and teaches leaders and their organizations how to lead effectively with relationship skills. That makes so much sense to me.
Oh, yay.
Her articles in leadership, relationship, and the connections between them are scattered across the interwebs, and she is currently writing a book called Lovers and Leaders: How to Co-Lead Towards the Perfect Relationship. She is also a New York State licensed therapist and has been in practice for 16 years. Blair, welcome to the Boomer's Ultimate Guide podcast.
Thank you. I'm so honored and thrilled to be here.
I am glad you could make time for me. And we're both New Yorkers, so we were having some fun before we started recording this particular episode about the fact that we're both New Yorkers. So that is always nice. So Blair, tell people a little bit more about you, what you do, how you help people. And if you feel so inclined, you can let people know whether or not you too are a boomer.
Okay, I certainly will. Let's get that off the bat. I am a Gen Xer, and I bow down to boomers for all of the incredible change.
We still love you. We still love you.
That you have brought to our culture. And the fact that I was a therapist, a successful therapist for 15 years, I owe in large part to boomers, because boomers normalized personal growth.
Okay. I like
so
that.
The generation before that, if you were going to get help, there was something wrong with you. So I feel very grateful to boomers for that. And as you said, I'm an organizational and relationship consultant, and the focus of my work is around leadership and relationship, really helping people get in touch with their wants, needs, and desires around intimacy, and also being able to stand in their authority so that their leadership, whether it's in a professional realm or even a familial realm, feels good to them and helps them have a sense of agency and self-respect.
See, when I was reading your bio, it just made so much sense to me, relationships and leadership. I imagine that's where the great leaders succeed, is because they really understand relationships, and where poor leaders fail is because they don't understand relationship.
We've seen that to be true again and again. And if you want to take people towards a vision, if you want to be able to influence them, you have to know who they are. You have to be able to speak to them in ways that you can be heard, and you have to know your impact. And I believe that's true, again, on a grand scale, on a broad scale, with big leaders like Steve Jobs or Malcolm X or Gandhi, but it's also true on a small scale in our homes with our partners and with our children.
Right. I love that. So you've admitted to working with boomers. Tell me, how is it different? How do you see working with boomers as being different from the other people you work with?
A lot of the boomers that I work with on a personal relationship and counseling level have already been steeped in some form of personal growth. And so there's an entryway that's already been established. They've either gone off somewhere and meditated, or they've been in therapy. And so we can get right down to things. And I love that about a lot of the boomers who've come to sought me out for personal counsel. In the organizational world, it's a whole different ballgame. Not all of the boomers speak the same personal growth language that I do. And what I really enjoy about that is being an educator without being too obvious about it. So that's been lovely.
Oh, I like that. All right. So tell me, if you could give us 3 tips, right, regarding relationship, leadership, how to really make this successful whether it's your personal life or your business life. What are the 3 tips that you would want to share with people?
I always love to encourage people to start with a vision. Now, when I say vision, it correlates to what other people might call a mission statement, but it's a little deeper and a little more layered than that. So if you've been in a relationship for a while and you feel like it's maybe getting a little stale, it's really great to sit down with your partner and say, why are we together now? And what is it that we're moving towards? Those 2 questions in personal relationships. Now, you can also use that for this stage of your life. You know, who is it that I want to be as I'm rounding this stage of my life? And what is it that I want to accomplish? And what is the impact that I want to have on those around me and those who I'm serving?
I can see how powerful that would be. I was talking to someone else about dating after 50, right?
Yes.
You know? And I've been married, I shared with him that I've been married 23 years, and we were together, you know, the 2 years prior to that dating. So it's been over 25 years since I dated. I had shared with him. But, you know, now that I have that on my mind, right, to sit down with my husband 25 years later and say, you know, we're happy that we're together. I'm glad to say we're still happy that we're together, right?
That's so great.
But how have things changed?
Yep.
And where are we headed? What were the 2 questions again? You know, where are we
Yes.
headed?
Why are we together?
Why are we together?
And what are we doing moving forward together?
Right. That is such a good conversation.
It is. It's
I'm
so
excited
fit.
to have that conversation with
Yay!
him now.
That makes me so happy. I hope some of your listeners are too.
Oh, that is wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I already interrupted you. That was just the first tip.
That was just
right?
the first.
Okay.
The second would be to do a review of the roles that you've been playing and take some inventory and see if there's some roles that you've outgrown and some roles that you might want to step into. Mm-hmm. And that's another leadership technique that I use in life and relationships that I find to be so eye-opening. Just to give you a little story, I recently worked with a young woman who was very close with her mother. The father had left early on, and she was really stepping out into the world, having major impact as a leader in her field. But her conversations with her mother were so stale. She felt like she regressed. Her mother would fire these rapid fire questions at her, and she came to me feeling pretty helpless. She loved her mother. She didn't want to reject her mother, but she couldn't stand feeling so burdened and confined in the relationship. And we looked at it from a role perspective. And we saw how her mother had outgrown needing to protect and worry about and care for her daughter in that particular way. But she couldn't shift out of those tasks. And
Right.
so she could only bring this very stale, sort of panicky version of herself. And so what we got to do, this young woman and I, is help her shift her reactivity and take charge, start to become more of the leader in the conversations with her mother, start to anticipate what her mother would do that would annoy her and beat her to the quick. And their relationship completely changed just by this young woman, who is not a boomer, but this young woman really understanding her roles and her mother's roles and how they had outgrown it. And they didn't even have to have a big processy conversation about it. She just changed her responsiveness and how she wanted to take charge in the conversation. She changed her role. She really changed her role.
That's fascinating. And you said, you know, she was a young woman and not a boomer, but her mother.
Exactly.
Right. So we can look at this. I'm looking at this from the other side, you know, having a 21-year-old and an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old.
Yes.
You know, they change, and my mothering of them has to change as well in order to let them grow up and, you know, be the men that they're all boys, right?
You
the
got
men
it.
that they're meant to be. So that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good. And a third
how do you
tip.
want to show up? How do you want to show up in that role? Yeah, exactly. So it's very creative. That's what another thing that I'm hoping. And then the third thing I would say is that at this stage of the game, sometimes you feel like if you've been in a long relationship for a while, it's time to just settle into companionship with your partner, and I think that that's fine. I call it the companionship model of relationship. And it can happen at any stage of life where two people live together more as roommates than they do as dynamic sexual partners. And what I want to say is that that's a totally fine choice as long as you do it consciously. If you're unhappy with moving towards this phase of your life in a companionship relationship, in a roommate relationship, if that doesn't feel right to you, then change it.
Yeah, you got to have a conversation around that one.
And it may be a number of conversations, and it may be a consultation with a professional, and it may involve some training, but it's worth it. It's going to be a great investment.
Right. Oh, I like that. Those are terrific tips. I
love
them already. So let me ask you the next question.
Yeah.
So those were great tips. Now identify for us, what do you think is the biggest challenge or challenges or concerns that boomers are experiencing as their relationships have gotten older and are changing?
It's hard for me to narrow it down. There are a couple of things that I can think of. One is, again, not letting fears and shame about aging shut you down and keep you isolated. I mean, that would be number one. How can you begin to have conversations about this with your partners and your friends and your children that are inclusive, that are useful, that include maybe some logistics that are going to be important? So these conversations are scary, they can be depressing, but I do think that they actually can create more intimacy, more of a sense of team, and I think that they're worth it.
They're probably cathartic in the end, right?
Yes. But I see that it's a real challenge to start to bring awareness, and so isolation becomes an issue. Another thing is that I feel that, and you may see this too, a lot of people are interested in changing careers later in life, in their late 50s and 60s.
Whether by choice or they're pushed into it, especially because of what happened with the economy in 2008. There's been a surge in entrepreneurship because of, in fact, they're calling it boomerpreneurs. Now, I just read an article this week, boomerpreneurs, new language again.
I want to read that.
Yeah.
So I would say that you really, you could get caught up in some despair around that. And even though I could understand that being a normal place to fall, that there are enough people out there doing it that you can connect with to know that, yeah, it's possible and you can make a huge impact as you change your career later in life.
Right. I don't know what lifespans are anymore, but it has certainly changed tremendously. And I turned 50 last year. I'll be 50 in October, 51 in October of this year.
Congratulations.
And when I think back as a child, 50 would have seemed ancient to me. Now, both my parents are still living in their mid-70s, and they don't even seem old to me anymore.
So
Yep. And in my head, I'm not really 50. I'm probably around 35, right? In my mind's eye.
Yep.
So there's a long time still to make an impact.
In some ways, my parents are more active than I am. So absolutely. And also, I just thought of Albert Brooks's book, 2036, which is a very funny but kind of confronting read about the fact that lifespans are extending so far. So I don't know why I felt the need to bring that.
I like Albert Brooks, and I haven't heard
of
that.
So funny. Yeah.
He's really funny. I bet you that's a good read.
Yeah, it is. It is. It'll. I think it's a hopeful read in some ways. But anyway.
Very good. Very good. So, if you could give advice to a boomer that's watching this right now or listening to the audio podcast right now, who's sitting and they're thinking, oh, you know what? I might live to 90.
Right.
And I'm just barely halfway through my life or 2/3 of the way through my life. What am I going to be doing? Or I've got this relationship that is just not what I want it to be anymore. It's changed. Or I'm having trouble in my corporate setting, with the leader that I have or the leader that I want to be. What would you tell them to do right now, right this moment, to get up off their chair and do now to start making changes? This
may seem a little bit anticlimactic to you because it's It's less of a get out of your chair kind of action. But to go back to the beginning of our talk, I would just take a moment to realize and recognize that you have been part of a generation that has caused some of the most incredible cultural change in history. That in your DNA, so to speak, that in the wave of consciousness that you have been growing in, has been this incredible transformation that really came from your generation. And if that's the case, then any changes that you want to make at this stage in the life should be easier for you, knowing the amount of change that you have seen as we have grown as a species.
I really like that outlook. You make me feel ready to go out and take over the whole world. I'm like
Good.
Pinky in the Brain here right now.
I'm
ready for world domination, Blair.
That's the point. That's the point.
I like that. You have really lifted me up. That is terrific.
Good.
So, would you please share with people the best way to get in contact with you, get more of you? I'm sure everyone will want more Blair Glaser now that they've heard you. So how can we find more of you?
I love when people connect with me through my website. I have an intimate relationship with my subscribers, and I tell them things that I don't broadcast on Facebook or Twitter. I'm starting a series about my own personal growth in relationship and how leadership became a way of thinking about my relationships and some of the mistakes that I've made. So that goes to my subscribers. So if you're interested in connecting with me in that way, please go to my site and sign up for my mailing list, and we can connect that way. And I love being on Twitter, as we talked about, and I have a lot of fun on Facebook too.
Perfect. So I want to give people the website. It's blairglaser.com, right? So let me spell it for people, because not everyone has a paper and pencil ready necessarily. It's www.blairglaser.com. Correct?
Correct.
And we will, of course, post this on the show notes of this particular episode, so people can always come find the link.
Thank
you. Anyone who knows me knows that I really love Twitter. When it comes to social media, of course, I talk about social media all the time, because that's the title of my... And I say my first book because I know in my heart of hearts there will be more books. But the first book is The Boomer's Ultimate Guide to Social Media. Twitter's my favorite. It's where I spend most of my time. I love it there. And you can find Blair at
Blair Glaser.
At Blair Glaser, right? BlairGlaser. And if you don't know what the at means, you're going to have to buy the book and read it, because I'll explain that to you. But you could also Google it, as my Italian father-in-law would say, "Va fa a Googla," which means go look it up on Google in Italian.
I love that.
That's become a thing around our house. When somebody says, "Well, what do you think happened there?" Or "What was that actor's name?" Or anything, because now we can look anything up on Google. So "Va fa a Googla."
Let's say it together. 1, 2, 3.
Va fa a Googla.
I love it.
Right.
I love it.
I should make T-shirts up. Very cute. He's my cutie, my 80-year-old father-in-law. Poppy, we call Poppy. We're talking about you. So Blair, before I let you go, could you share any inspirational quote, story, a brief story that you'd like to leave us with, something to send us on our way?
My quote that I always love to give, that I use at the end of quite a few of my articles, is love yourself no matter what. And it's just a really good go-to. Just always makes sense, no matter what you've come across, no matter what you've encountered, no matter what you've stumbled upon within yourself. If you can find a way to love yourself, I think that you're open to more choices.
Yeah, everything else will be okay if you can do that. Blair Glaser, thank you so much for making time for
My
the Boomer's
pleasure.
Ultimate Guide podcast. I really enjoyed speaking to you today.
Me too.
And she and I discovered, I told you at the beginning of the podcast that we're both New Yorkers, and we're not that far apart from one another, maybe an hour to 90 minutes, so we'll figure out a way to hang out in real life, IRL, as they would call that in social media circles. We'll see each other in real life one of these days too. Does that sound like a good idea?
IRL, I'm there.
I would love it. All of you, you have been listening to the Boomers Ultimate Guide podcast. Once again, thank you, Blair Glaser. Visit her website at www.blairglaser.com. You can find the link on the show notes. And until next time, please take care. You've been watching Boomers Ultimate Guide TV, the place where baby boomers like me and like you can come together to learn, share, and grow a thriving business and vibrant life. See you next time.